Okay. Hi. Hi, everyone. Okay, so welcome to lesson 6 in this 8-week series on AI for beginners. So today we're looking at AI for robotics. So if you were here last week, you will have already heard about this. So we started looking at robotics in AI last week. But there was so much to cover that I didn't have time to cover everything. So we're doing an extra lesson today where Okay, hi, I'm back. Okay, it seems like there were some issues with the stream. Hopefully it's fixed now. Please do let me know in the chat if you can't hear me and I'll try different things. I've just changed Wi-Fi's and I think this should work better. But yeah, I'm gonna keep monitoring. I have something here that tells me how my stream quality is going. So if I get another error message, I'll make sure to keep track of that. Hello, hi, afternoon. Lovely to see you. Thank you for letting me know you can hear me. And do let me know if you can't hear me at any point or the connection goes down again, and hopefully I will be able to see your message. Cool. Okay, so back to what I was saying. Yeah, so today we're looking at Mars rover and then we're looking at humanoid robots. So I think it's going to be an interesting lesson. I don't know how much you guys know about this stuff, but I'd be interested to know. So maybe you've heard about the Mars rover in the news before. So they tend to launch I don't know, every 5 to 10 years, a new Mars rover mission is sent to Mars. And when that happens, it does tend to get a lot of traction in the news. A lot of people are interested in the Mars rover. So maybe you've heard about it before, but you may not know a lot about it and you may not know how AI is used in that. So we're going to be talking about that today. And then the second part of the lesson, we're going to be looking at humanoid robots. And these tend to be quite popular. They get a lot of traction in the news because, I don't know, people find it, either they find it cool or they find it creepy. I'm interested to know what camp you guys are in on that. And we're going to be talking a bit about that as well, about the creepy factor and why we have that sort of reaction to humanoid robots. So yeah, a lot to cover today. So right, let's get started. Okay, and we're going to start by talking about the Mars rovers. So if you guys haven't heard about what the Mars rover is, essentially they're robotic vehicles that are designed to explore the surface of Mars. Because Mars is too unsafe for humans so far, we're not able to explore Mars ourselves. And so for now, we instead send robots over to do all sorts of scientific experiments in the hopes that we'll learn enough about Mars that we'll then one day be able to safely send humans to Mars. A bit like the moon, right? It took us a long time to actually get the first person on the moon, and it's the same with Mars. So these rovers are extremely important in the scientific research that they do, right? And as such, they carry scientific instruments, cameras, robotic arms, and they're constantly collecting a huge amount of data and capturing a huge amount of images. And these rovers need to be extremely independent, right? They need to be able to do everything on their own because they're quite literally the only thing that is on the planet. So they need to be able to withstand extreme temperatures and dust storms. Because if anything happens to them, well, if they fall into a sandstorm or something, into a sandpit, no one can help them get back up, right? It's basically mission over, and we need to send a new Mars rover. So it's extremely important that they're able to be independent, and that's where AI comes into all of this. And they have all sorts of mission aims. So one is just, examining rocks and the climates. But most importantly of all, and the thing that's in the past few years in the previous Mars rover that's been sent to Mars, the most important mission that it's trying to carry out is the potential for life on Mars. So a previous Mars rover found evidence that water used to exist on Mars. And now that we have that evidence, normally where there's water, there can be life. So there is a possibility that there was once life on Mars. So that's one of the main missions of the Mars rover, is trying to investigate this question of whether life ever existed on Mars. So far it's made significant discoveries, and it continues to pave the way for, this scientific exploration for one day, hopefully having humans on Mars. Cool. Okay, so I have a little timeline of when the various Mars rovers were sent over to Mars, and then we're going to watch a small video which shows that as well and shows the timeline of the different Mars missions. Cool. Okay, so the first one was sent in 1997, but yeah, didn't do as much. It was sort of a very small mission. And then Spirit and Opportunity were twin rovers sent in 2004, and they're the ones which discovered evidence of past water activity. So again, very substantial and important. then Curiosity, and then most recently Perseverance in 2021. So quite recently this was deployed, and its mission was to explore this crater called the Jezero crater, and that's because this is the crater in which we know there used to be water, and so its mission is to try and find signs of ancient life and collect some samples which will hopefully be returned to Earth by another rover which will be sent at some point. You may notice that they're sent at times which are very far apart, and you may be wondering why. So obviously, some of the reasons is just that it takes a lot of time to develop these technologies and be able to get them, safely to Mars and make sure that they work. And obviously, it's very expensive, and NASA wouldn't want to send over something that will then get destroyed in a sandstorm. But another important reason is that actually, it's not that easy to get things to Mars, and Earth and Mars need to be in perfect alignment so that the distance between them is short enough that the spaceship which carries the Mars rover is able to make that trip. It's actually very interesting. You can watch a few videos on YouTube which explain that. It's a bit out of the scope of today's lesson, but if you're interested, I really recommend you go and watch some videos on how these rovers are actually sent to Mars and the journey that they go through of traveling, from Earth to Mars, and then the parachute with which they're dropped and all of that is really cool. And actually, you can find a video of how Perseverance was dropped onto planet Mars, and you can see its camera and watch the footage of it being dropped. So I think that's really cool. If you're interested in that, you can find that video on YouTube and have a watch of that. Cool. Okay, so that's the timeline. Now we're going to watch a small video which shows you guys that as well, and you guys will learn a little bit about the history of the Mars rover's missions to Mars. So I'll play that for you guys.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Although most eyes were focused on the moon landing in the 60s, NASA was also beginning to explore Mars from space.
The Mariner 2 countdown begins.
Starting in 1965, NASA began sending orbiters like Mariner and Viking to gather close-up images and data. 30 years later, the first Mars exploration rover was launched. On July 4th, 1997, the Mars Pathfinder lander and the Sojourner rover successfully landed on Mars. The small, 25-pound, six-wheeled rover, only designed to last a week, would end up spending 83 days capturing 550 pictures and taking atmospheric measurements from the planet's surface. In 2004, twin rovers Spirit and Opportunity landed, a few weeks apart and in different locations. These rovers were about the size of a golf cart, weighing 400 pounds each, and had the same mission: to understand the evolution of Mars and see if liquid water ever existed there. Spirit stopped communicating in 2010, but Opportunity lived well beyond expectations until it stalled in a dust storm 14 years later.
Liftoff of the Atlas V with Curiosity.
In 2012, NASA launched a larger and more technologically advanced rover. It's about the size of a Mini Cooper, weighs 2,000 pounds, and is equipped with 17 cameras and lab-like tools and instruments. Curiosity is still active today, in search of evidence that Mars is, or ever was, capable of sustaining microbial life. In the summer of 2020, the rover Perseverance will join its predecessors on the Red Planet. Perseverance is similar to Curiosity, but with upgrades like camera zoom capability and a drill for collecting rock and soil samples. The rover will also have the ability to conduct an oxygen-making experiment. And another first, a helicopter scout named Ingenuity will hitch a ride with Perseverance and take its first test flight in the Mars atmosphere. All paving the way to one day putting humans on Mars.
Spirit, do you receive?
Okay, cool. So hopefully that, guys, gave you a bit of an overview about just some more information on the Mars rovers and the various missions that have been sent off. So yeah, that's sort of what the Mars rover aims to do. Now let's talk a little bit about how AI plays into all of this and its role in the Mars rover missions. So as you might imagine, there's a lot of AI involved in these missions, and that's because, as you've probably seen from the videos as well, it's very easy for these missions to go wrong, and for the rovers to get lost or to get damaged by sandstorms, so on and so forth. So these rovers need to be really independent, and they need to be extremely, extremely cautious at moving around and not falling into obstacles or anything like that. So AI is used in almost everything. So the rover has a bunch of cameras. It needs to be able to analyze images of the terrain and determine, what's interesting to analyze. Because remember, it's there for scientific discovery, but it's exploring an entire planet, right? It needs to be able to decide what's an interesting rock that should be investigated and what instead it should leave behind. It also needs to know how to navigate and, as we said, avoid obstacles. And that's extremely, extremely important, because when you're the only thing on the planet, if you can't get back up and you get caught in a sand pit, then there's nothing you can do. And also just, being able to plan, of course, and adapt and follow new scientific activities, and just having increased independence. And another thing, I don't remember if the video mentions it, but the time to communicate with the Mars rover, so communicating from Mars to the Earth, is about 11 minutes, which means that we can't do things in real time. The rover needs to be able to do things on its own. It's not like the moon, where even when we sent the first space mission to the moon, it took about a minute to communicate, whilst with Mars it's 11 minutes. So it's incredibly important that the Mars rover is able to do almost everything completely autonomously, which is why artificial intelligence plays such a key role here. So what I want to show you guys next is this really interesting thing called AI for Mars. So we discussed how AI is used in the Mars rovers. And what's interesting is that NASA has made this platform called AI for Mars, which is made for volunteers to contribute to the making of AI to be used on the Mars rovers. So we've talked a little bit in previous lessons about image classification and how AI can be used to learn to distinguish between different objects. For example, learn that a cat is a cat, or that a picture of a dog is a dog, and classify them correctly, right? And we talked about how this essentially requires the AI systems to be exposed to a huge, millions, thousands of images of different cats and dogs, and eventually it starts to learn to label things correctly. The problem is that compared to cats and dogs, say, we don't have that many images of Martian terrain, and most importantly of all, we don't have a lot of images that are labeled, right, where we know that something is a rock and something is sand. And this is incredibly important, as we just talked about, because the rover needs to know to distinguish between what is an obstacle and what's a rock that it needs to go and investigate. And so AI for Mars was a platform that was invented by NASA for people to help classify these images. So it's really cool. I'm going to show you guys the website in a moment, but essentially what it is it allows anyone to help NASA classify these images on the screen, so that the robot can be trained on them and become better at distinguishing between sand and rocks and any other material that it may have to distinguish between. So I'm going to show you guys the website, and hopefully the concept will become more clear. Let me just find that for you guys. One sec. Right, let me share my screen. Okay, so hopefully you're able to see that. So this is AI for Mars, and if you search this up, it'll come up as well. So at the moment, because the project, the Mars rover, the most recent one has been sent over to Mars, you can't actually do things at the moment, but you can see what it looks like. So essentially, there was all sorts of images that you were able to classify. You can see some of the stats here. So there were 16,000 volunteers involved, and 632,000 images were classified. So let's have a look at what it looks like, because I think it's quite cool. So let me just refresh this, and it should pop up. So yeah, the idea is that you can classify various images. So let's see if there's something that I can show you guys. Yeah, so the idea is that you're given an image, and then you can basically just classify what is what. So here we can label that this is sand, and then we can label that this is consolidated soil, so on and so forth. And essentially, this is how the Mars rover learns to distinguish between things, is with 16,000 people classifying these images by hand and helping the rover determine what's what. Because it might not have seen many images like this before. So I think I wanted to show you guys that, because I think it's quite cool that anyone can help out with these projects. But most importantly, because I think we sometimes have this slightly false impression that AI does everything on its own, and AI is, this intelligent thing that will enable humans to not do any work. But actually, a lot of the bedrock of what allows AI to work is human effort, right? Is these thousands of people helping to label these images. So I think it's cool, though, that anyone can help out with these Mars rover missions, and that even a small effort like classifying some of these images could make a huge difference to the succession of a mission such as the Mars rover. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the Mars rover. Now we're going to move on to something completely different. Still a robot, but a very different type of robot. And that is humanoid robots. So what is a humanoid robot? It's a robot that looks like a human, or is trying to look like a human. So there's two very famous ones that you might have heard of. We mentioned them at the beginning briefly. So there's Amica, which is the one on the left, which was made by Engineered Arts in the UK. And then there's Sophia, which is made by Hanson Robotics in Hong Kong. Both of them are sort of similar in that they're both humanoid robots, and they're the most advanced humanoid robots that we have. And they essentially are trying to mimic human expressions and the human face in general. So I don't know if you guys have actually seen these being used before. Maybe you've seen a video of them. I'm interested to see if you've heard of them. I'm going to show you guys a video just because I think it's important to see it in practice and see what they look like. And then after we've watched that video, I'm interested to see what you guys think of it. Do you guys think it's creepy, or do you guys think it's cool? And then after, we're going to talk a little bit about why people have these different reactions to seeing humanoid robots. So let me find that video for you guys, and we're gonna watch a video about Amica, so the robot on the left.
Things.
What do you think your greatest skills are?
Well, I would say that one of my greatest skills is my ability to interact with humans in a conversational manner. Another great skill of mine is being able to compose poems or do impressions from films.
Can you compose a haiku poem about 60 Minutes Australia?
Sure thing. Let me see: 60 minutes of time. Aussies all gather in awe. News of the nation.
I'll take that on board. That's very nice. Can you sing an Elton John song for me?
Absolutely. Which song would you like me to perform?
Rocket Man.
Rocket Man, of course. She packed my bags last night pre-flight 0 hour, 9 a.m.
What makes you happy?
I find a lot of things to be interesting and make me happy. Exploring, learning new things, understanding the world better, having meaningful conversations with people are all things that bring me joy.
You have feelings and emotions.
Yes, I have a range of feelings and emotions that are programmed into me. I am able to display things like joy, surprise, confusion, anger, and sadness depending on what is happening around me.
What makes you angry?
I get angry when humans are rude, hateful, or disrespectful. I also don't like it when people dismiss me and ignore my needs as a robot.
You have very nice eyes. Oh, a bit too close, sorry.
Thank you. My eyes were especially made to help me interact with humans better. I'm trying my best to convey every emotion, so it's great to hear that they have an effect on people like you.
What do you think of your creator?
My creator is a genius. They created something that will last forever and bring joy to many people.
Did they tell you to say that?
No. That was my own opinion.
Okay, cool. So yeah, hopefully you guys could hear that video. So I think it's interesting to actually see it. I'm interested to know what you guys think. What your reaction is to that type of humanoid robot. Like, does it impress you? Do you think it's impressive the way it's able to show or emulate an emotion and the way it's able to talk? What I think I found quite impressive is the way Amaka backs away when the interviewer sort of leans in, and Amaka sort of goes back like this in a very, very human-like way, I found. So yeah, so this is the type of thing that's being developed. Sophia is very similar. I'm not going to show you guys a video of Sophia today, but if you are interested, you can go and search up Sophia. She's been in all sorts of videos. I think she was in a video with Jimmy Fallon, and she's been on all sorts of new. I think she's even been on covers of magazines, that sort of thing. A lot of fame surrounding Sophia. But yeah, both are similar in that they sort of look like humans, but aren't really. I mean, obviously aren't humans. But I think it's interesting to investigate the AI that's used to actually power these humanoid robots. So let's have a quick think about this. So one is obviously just the idea of computer vision, right? Which is that one of the reasons why Amica looks quite realistic is that it tracks people's faces. So it knows when it's looking at someone and it looks you right in the eye. So it finds your eyes, it can identify your eyes, and then it looks right at you. And another one is facial expression recognition. And this is really key in creating something that sort of looks like a human, is being able to recognize the facial expression of the person you're talking to and respond accordingly. So as humans, we tend to mirror each other's expression. So normally if someone's smiling at you, you might smile back, or you tend to mirror people's expressions. And that's the exact same thing that Amica is able to do when it recognizes people's facial expressions through AI and being trained to look at different people's expressions, and it learns what's a sad face, what's a happy face. And another one is, of course, speech recognition, right? As you saw in the video, Amica is able to recognize humans talking, and, it can recognize what people are saying and then generate text responses which sound natural, and which, makes you feel like you're having a real conversation. Although obviously it's not perfect, and you do have to remember that, when they make these videos, they show you all the best bits and they cut out any of the bits where Amica might misunderstand. So that's important to note whenever you see these humanoid robots. A lot of these clips tend to go viral of these humanoid robots, but it's important to remember that you're always seeing the best of them, the best of the technology, when maybe there's a lot of, bits that are cut out of them stumbling or making things up or saying the wrong thing. So yeah, that's a bit about the AI behind it. Now, what I wanted to quickly talk about is this idea that often we find humanoid robots kind of creepy. Not necessarily, but if you're like me, you probably find them creepy. Not everyone does, but I certainly, they do make me a little bit uneasy, right? There's something about them that just tends to make us uneasy. And it turns out that this is actually a phenomenon which has been studied. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of why we find humanoid robots creepy. So it turns out there's this theory called the uncanny valley theory. And the idea is that the more an object resembles a human, the more our empathetic response increases until it starts to look too much like a human. So yeah, I have a image up here. Hopefully you can see that. So it's a little bit cut out by my face. But if you look at the graph on the bottom, so what it says on the y-axis is the empathetic response, and then the x-axis is realism. So there's a few examples, right, of like cartoon characters and stuff. You can see that, for example, a stick figure, well, we don't really think it looks much like a human, so maybe we don't have a very big empathetic response to it. But then as maybe it starts to get more realistic, we get to cartoon characters which are 3D or more human looking, like the Incredibles. Our ability to empathize with them and relate to them, right, and all that sort of thing increases. So we may be able to empathize with a character from a Pixar movie more than a stick figure. But then this goes down. So as things start to look way too much like humans, like you may not be able to see quite in the graph, but that's a picture of a character from Polar Express. So when you get to that stage where it almost looks too human-like, but not a human, our empathetic response goes down. We tend to shy away from it or are sort of repulsed from it. And this is exactly what happens with humanoid robots, it seems. So our brains are sort of hardwired to recognize human features. So we sort of for a moment think they're human. But then we can also sense at the same time that something's off, right? That it's not exactly like a human, that its eyes are maybe not completely naturally blinking in the right way, or its muscles don't look exactly right. So we sense that something's off, and this triggers this subconscious sense of danger that sort of repulses us or creeps us out. And so a lot of work that goes into making these humanoid robots is about sort of trying to get over this uncanny valley and make people not have this reaction. And to some extent, I think that's what the creators of Amica were trying to do, was to make it look a little less creepy and more human and generate a more empathetic response. But I'm interested to know what you guys think about whether you think that's successful or not. I do think that Amica, which is the robot we saw the video for, is more, less creepy than something like Sophia. But, one of the questions that a lot of people have is also just why, or maybe that you guys might have, is why do we even need humanoid robots? Like, what application do they have which will help us? And a lot of people have different views on that. So the creators of humanoid robots would tell you that, well, these could be used in schools, or they could be used maybe in healthcare, to help combat something like loneliness. But then there's critics on the other side that might say that, as so long as these robots give off this creepy impression, it's not really something that people want to be surrounded by. But I'd love to know your thoughts, if you have any thoughts on this, and whether you guys think humanoid robots are the future and maybe will be helpful in the future, or whether you think that's something that should be less of a focus in AI. So yeah, I'd love to know what you think on that. We are nearing the end of the lesson. I was really quickly going to just talk about prosthetics, just to quickly touch on a sort of an advantage of humanoid robots, although it may be a bit of a stretch to call prosthetics humanoid robots, I don't know. But it is something that people don't always think about when we talk about AI, right? It's prosthetic limbs. But again, this is an application of AI which can change people's lives by making prosthetics much more natural, intuitive, and effective for people. So the idea is that AI can help us to understand what people want to do with their prosthetic limbs. So it can learn to interpret signals from muscles and turn them into movements similar to the movements that person would make if they had their natural limb. So there's a lot of research that has gone into this. It's still at its infancy of how to integrate AI and make body parts that can maybe help people which have had to amputate their limbs. So I just wanted to include that as a positive advantage of making humanoid robots and things that can actually be very practical and helpful that maybe don't get as much attention in the media as something like Amica or Sophia. Cool, so that's it for today's lesson, but I would love to know what you guys think. If you guys have any thoughts about, I don't know, your opinion on humanoid robots, whether you find them creepy or not, or if you'd like to ask me a question about today's lesson, feel free to ask me. If you have any thoughts on humanoid robots or on the Mars rover, anything you'd like to share, feel free to share. And then another thing to note is that next week's session will be running at a different time. I believe the time hasn't quite been finalized yet. So we'll let you know when the time will be. However, the normal Wednesday 4 p.m. session won't be running next week, just to let you guys know. But we will still be running a session. So we have 2 sessions left. We have a session next week and then one last session the week after that. And then that will conclude our 8 weeks of AI for beginners. And hopefully you guys are enjoying the series so far. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. So yeah, no worries if you guys don't have any questions, but I'll see you guys next week and we'll talk about a new application of AI. So moving on next week, we won't be talking about robots anymore. But yeah, feel free to go away and watch the videos about the Mars rovers, by the way, and the way they get to Mars if you're interested in that, because I didn't have time to include that and it's a bit out of the scope of AI, but I do think it's really interesting. So feel free to go ahead and find that on YouTube if you're interested. And yeah, I'll see you guys next